You got the raise. Finally, after months of grinding, maybe years of patience, the number in your offer letter or on that pay stub finally moved. And for a moment, maybe a whole weekend, it felt incredible. You did the math in your head. You thought about what you'd pay off, what you'd save, how different things would feel. You maybe even told yourself, okay, this is the turning point. And then, 6 months later, you check your bank account and it looks basically the same as it did before the raise, maybe worse. The money came in and the money went out, and somehow you're still living paycheck to paycheck, just at a slightly more expensive version of the same stress. You upgraded the apartment, or the car lease came up and you went a little bigger, or you started eating out more because, hey, you work hard, you deserve it. And none of those individual decisions felt wrong, they all felt earned. My name is Macro, and I spend probably too much time thinking about money. Not just the numbers side of it, but the psychological side, the behavioral side, the reason why perfectly smart, hardworking people keep finding themselves stuck in financial patterns they never consciously chose. Why some people seem to build wealth almost quietly, without dramatic sacrifices, while others earn more and somehow feel broker with every passing year. And the thing I keep coming back to, the pattern that shows up everywhere once you know what to look for, is this invisible trap called lifestyle inflation. It's not a new concept, but I think most people massively underestimate how deep it goes, how subtle it is, and honestly, how it's basically been engineered into the way modern life is structured. By the end of this, I want you to walk away with something more than just spend less. That's not useful advice. That's like telling someone who's drowning to swim better. What I want to give you is a real framework for understanding why this keeps happening, what's actually driving it beneath the surface, and a few genuinely actionable ideas that don't require you to become a monk or track every latte you buy. Because here's the thing, lifestyle inflation isn't a character flaw, it's a system. And once you understand the system, you can start working with it instead of being quietly eaten alive by it. Okay, so most people, when they hear lifestyle inflation, they think it just means spending more when you earn more. And that's technically correct, but I think that framing is almost too simple because it makes it sound like a conscious choice, like people are sitting down and going, I've decided to inflate my lifestyle now. That's not how it works. Lifestyle inflation is mostly invisible. It happens in the negative space, in the things you stop questioning, the upgrades that feel like they're just part of growing up, the baseline that quietly shifts underneath you without you ever signing off on it. Here's what I mean. When you're making $40,000 a year, you might have a pretty firm grip on your spending. You know roughly what things cost. You feel the friction of purchases because money feels scarce. But when income goes up, say you're at $70,000, then $90,000, then into six figures, something psychological happens. The friction fades. Individual purchases stop feeling significant. A $200 dinner used to feel like a decision, now it barely registers. A $150 monthly subscription for something you barely use just sits there, because canceling it feels like more effort than the money is worth. That erosion of friction is the real mechanism of lifestyle inflation. It's not dramatic, it's the slow replacement of financial awareness with financial numbness. And here's the part that really gets me. Your savings rate can actually drop as your income rises, if you're not paying attention. There are plenty of people earning $150,000 a year who save less proportionally than they did at $60,000. Because every new income level comes with a new normal, a new set of reference points, a new idea of what's reasonable. There's this concept in psychology called the hedonic treadmill, and I think it's one of the most useful and honestly kind of depressing ideas in all of behavioral economics. The basic premise is this. Humans have a remarkable ability to return to a roughly stable level of happiness after major life events, both good and bad. You get a raise, you feel great, but within weeks or months, that new salary is just your new normal. You get the nicer apartment, and then within a few months, you stop really seeing it. It's just where you live now. The joy has a shelf life. The expense does not. And the cruel design of the hedonic treadmill is that it keeps you moving. Because once the new thing stops feeling new, the only way to recreate that feeling is to go bigger. Nicer car, bigger apartment, better vacations. The treadmill doesn't have an off switch, it just keeps going faster. I think about this sometimes when I look at people who, from the outside, seem to have everything. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, and they're miserable. Not because they're ungrateful, but because they've been running on the treadmill so long they can't remember what it felt like to not be running. The things that were supposed to bring them peace are just obligations now. Mortgage, maintenance, insurance, upkeep. The stuff owns them more than they own the stuff. This is important because it reframes the conversation around lifestyle inflation. It's not just a math problem, it's a happiness problem. Every time you inflate your lifestyle in response to an income increase, you're borrowing against your future contentment. You're raising the floor of what you need to feel okay, and the floor just keeps rising. Here's the part that I think people really underestimate, because it requires admitting something uncomfortable. A lot of lifestyle inflation isn't even really about us, it's about other people. There's this fascinating study, and I'm going to be loose with the details because this is YouTube, not a research paper, where researchers found that people's spending habits were more closely correlated with the spending of people in their immediate social circle than with their own income. Meaning, you adapt your spending not to what you can afford, but to what the people around you are spending. Which makes total sense when you think about it. Humans are deeply social creatures, and money is deeply social. The car you drive, the neighborhood you live in, the restaurants you go to, the vacation photos you post, these are all social signals. We're not just buying stuff, we're buying belonging, we're buying status, we're buying a version of ourselves that fits into the world we want to inhabit. And look, I'm not saying that's entirely bad. Some of that is just human. But the problem is when it becomes unconscious. When you upgrade your lifestyle not because you want something different, but because you're dimly aware that your current setup no longer matches the people around you, and that gap makes you uncomfortable. I know someone, I won't get too specific, who went through a pretty significant income jump in their late 20s, and within about 2 years, almost all of it had evaporated into a lifestyle that looked, from the outside, pretty impressive. But they confided to me once that they didn't actually like most of it. The big apartment felt like too much space. The car was stressful to maintain. The expensive dinners out were fine, but not better than cheaper places they used to love. They'd bought an aesthetic, basically, a performance of success, and they were paying for the performance every single month. The question worth sitting with is, how much of your spending is genuinely making your life better, and how much of it is keeping up with a script someone else wrote? Okay, so we've talked about the big stuff, apartments, cars, income jumps, but here's where lifestyle inflation gets genuinely sneaky. The small stuff. The subscriptions, the premium upgrades, the slight step-ups in everyday spending that each feel so insignificant you'd feel almost silly writing them down. You used to drink regular coffee. Now you go to the nicer place because it's just coffee, it's not that much. You used to fly economy. Now you automatically check business class because after a few years of traveling for work, coach just feels wrong for your body. You used to shop at the regular grocery store. Now you exclusively shop somewhere with better produce and somehow your grocery bill is 60% higher and you're not sure exactly why. None of these individual things is a problem. The problem is the accumulation, and more specifically, the way each of them raises your internal benchmark, your sense of what's normal. Because once your normal shifts, going back doesn't just feel inconvenient, it feels like a step backward, like failure, like you're regressing.
And that emotional weight, that feeling that downgrading is somehow a defeat, is what traps people. It's not the money. It's the identity wrapped around the money. You've built a lifestyle that now requires a certain income just to maintain. Any drop in income isn't just a financial problem, it's an identity crisis. This is why financial advisors talk about savings being automated before you ever see the money. Not because people are irresponsible, but because if the money hits your account first, your brain will find a use for it. Your lifestyle will expand to fill whatever space is available. It's almost like a law of financial physics. There's a quote I come back to a lot, and I'm going to paraphrase it loosely because I don't want to get the wording wrong, but the gist is this: wealth is the money you don't spend. the car you didn't buy, the upgrade you didn't take. Real wealth is largely invisible because it's the accumulation of restrained decisions over time. But we live in a world that rewards the performance of wealth, not the reality of it. Think about who gets the most visible signals of financial success. The person with the $80,000 car and the luxury apartment, not the person with $400,000 in index funds and a modest house. The person who's looking wealthy. And here's the twisted part. The person who's looking wealthy might actually be significantly more financially stressed than their neighbor driving a 10-year-old car. This is a crisis of optics. We've tied our understanding of financial success to spending, when actual financial success is fundamentally about not spending, or at least about the gap between what you earn and what you keep. And the algorithm doesn't help, honestly. Your social feed is curated around aspiration. You see the trips, the cars, the outfits, the restaurants. You don't see the debt load, the credit card statements, the quiet anxiety. You see the performance without the backstage. And it warps your sense of what's normal, what's possible, what you should be doing with money. The deeply unsexy truth about building wealth is that it mostly looks like nothing from the outside. It looks like not buying the thing. It looks like driving the same car for an extra 3 years. It looks like living in the neighborhood that's a bit less impressive than you could technically afford. It's boring. It doesn't make a good Instagram post, but it's the actual mechanism by which wealth is built for the vast majority of people who aren't landing massive windfalls or stock options. Here's something that I find genuinely fascinating about high earners who are still financially stressed. There's often this belief running somewhere in the background that they just need to earn a bit more. Like if income got to a certain number, the anxiety would stop. The math would finally click. Everything would click. But the target moves. It always moves, because your spending has grown to match your income. The income number that would solve things is always somewhere ahead of where you currently are. At $60,000, you think $100,000 will feel like freedom. At $100,000, you think $150,000 will do it. At $150,000, maybe $200,000. The horizon keeps moving because the baseline keeps rising. This is the treadmill again, but applied to income aspiration instead of material goods. And it's exhausting because the finish line is never where you thought it was. You're chasing a feeling, not a number. And the feeling is generated by the gap between what you earn and what you spend, not by the absolute number of either. This is why two people with completely different incomes can feel exactly the same amount of financial stress. The person earning $50,000 and spending $48,000 feels about as stretched as the person earning $180,000 and spending $175,000. The gap is the thing. The gap is what matters. And lifestyle inflation systematically destroys the gap no matter how much income grows. All right, so we've spent a good amount of time diagnosing the problem. Let me talk about what actually helps. And I want to be careful here, because I think a lot of personal finance advice fails people by being either too abstract or too punishing. Just budget better isn't useful. Track every purchase in a spreadsheet works for maybe 3% of people for maybe 3 months.
The first thing, and this is genuinely the highest leverage move, is to automate savings before you get a chance to feel the money. Every time your income goes up, increase your automated savings rate first. Before you spend a single cent of that raise, redirect a meaningful portion to savings, investments, or debt repayment. The raise that you never see in your checking account is the raise you can't inflate around. This one habit alone separates the people who quietly build wealth from the people who perpetually wonder where their money went. The second thing is to create intentional friction for big lifestyle upgrades. When you're considering a significant spending increase, a nicer apartment, a car upgrade, a major subscription, give yourself a 30-day minimum. Not because you should never upgrade your life, but because a lot of lifestyle inflation happens in the emotional momentum of an income bump. The 30 days lets the emotional high settle so you can make the decision from a more grounded place. A lot of things that seemed urgent in the moment look completely unnecessary a month later. The third thing, and this is more psychological than practical, is to work on finding your actual enough. Not a theoretical enough, not a socially acceptable enough, but your enough. What does a genuinely good life look like for you specifically if you subtract all the performance and the social comparison? What do you actually need to feel comfortable, peaceful, and engaged? For a lot of people, that number is meaningfully lower than the life they're currently funding. The gap between your genuine needs and your current spending is often where lifestyle inflation is hiding. And the fourth thing, start noticing your new normals before they fully calcify. There's usually a window, right when you're making an upgrade, when you can still feel the friction, still sense that this is a choice. That window closes fast. The new thing becomes the expected thing very quickly. Pay attention in that window. Ask yourself honestly whether this is a genuine improvement to your life or whether it's you unconsciously matching some external signal about what people at your income level are supposed to do. Here's what I want to leave you with, and I want to be careful not to make this feel more dramatic than it is. Lifestyle inflation isn't a moral failing. It isn't proof that you're bad with money or that you lack discipline. It is an almost completely predictable response to how modern economic life is designed. Rising incomes are supposed to flow outward. Consumption is supposed to grow. That's the whole engine of the economy you live inside. Fighting it isn't natural or easy. It requires deliberate intention in a world that's specifically structured to erode that intention at every turn. But here's the thing. The people who navigate it well, and they exist, they're everywhere, they just don't look like what you'd expect, aren't doing anything dramatically difficult. They're mostly just conscious. They made a decision at some point to define enough on their own terms instead of letting the culture define it for them. They found ways to separate identity from spending. They automated the boring, important stuff so it happened without requiring daily willpower. And they stopped chasing the feeling of financial arrival because they understood that the feeling doesn't come from the income number. It comes from the gap and from the security of watching that gap compound over time. The raise you get next year can be different. It doesn't have to disappear into a slightly more expensive version of the same financial stress. The money can actually land somewhere meaningful, but only if you've decided in advance where you want it to go. More money doesn't automatically mean more security. More money doesn't automatically mean more freedom. What it means is more choices. And whether those choices move you toward wealth or just toward a more expensive treadmill is entirely, quietly, up to you. That's worth thinking about.